Welcome to the Game Design Hacks. I am Dale.
And I'm Tom.
In this episode, we're going to look at Tom's first game design challenge for me, which is ancient Greek Court Intrigue.
I can't wait.
Oh yeah, it should be pretty sweet. And, we'll discuss the Nintendo Direct, we'll discuss Stadia Studios, some stuff from Lamington Games, and Larian Studios. So, without further ado, I guess this is the theme song.
Boop, 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 boop. Dale and Tom Show.
Dale and Tom Show. Okay, cool. Welcome to episode 4, in which I do the ancient Greek Court Intrigue game design challenge. But before we get into that, we'll cover a couple of the news and happenings of late. Last week, Nintendo did a Nintendo Direct, so there's some interesting stuff in there. There's also some not that interesting stuff in there. It was a very mixed bag.
Yeah, and it kind of came out of nowhere, didn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know how far ahead of time it was announced.
Yeah, it's kind of like, okay, guys, we've got nothing to announce and we're going to do it immediately.
Yep, and there's going to be a lot of it.
Yeah, a lot of not much. So I guess right off the top, we've got Skyward Sword in there at one stage. That was just a masterful troll, the part where E.G.I. Numa shows up and says, "Hey guys, you can see me," and you know what that means. It means not what you think it does. It means Skyward Sword. And I like Skyward Sword. There's a lot of naysayers, and the controls were a bit fiddly, but I really liked the scale to it. And when it was working well, it was like really fun to play.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the Zelda games I haven't had a chance to play, so I'm kind of excited to have a chance to do it on my Switch.
Yeah, it's definitely got a bit of a long feeling. Is one of the kind of comments you see a lot. There's a bit of repeated territory and that sort of thing, and the area's quite broken up. But I'm looking forward to diving back into that again. I think maybe that one took me years to finish. I played it up in so many broken segments that I actually didn't mind if it felt long or not. But I guess that shows you that it probably did feel long.
What sort of Zelda game was it? Sort of on the Breath of the Wild to, Ocarina of Time continuum? Do you remember?
Yeah. It's very heavily into the dungeon design, and it's very linear. All of the overworld stuff is probably even more linear than it was in Twilight Princess. The dungeons themselves are incredibly well designed, like some of the best puzzle dungeons that I think the series has ever seen. The overworld is quite restricted. The sky feels a little flat. Yeah, we should definitely go into this one when it comes out in July for sure. There's a lot of stuff to unpack with what makes that work and what doesn't, though, so that will be a long episode.
Yeah, well, I feel like dungeon design's almost become a little bit of a lost art these days, where, open world seems to be the thing that a lot of designers lean on over, tightly crafted dungeoneering experiences.
Yeah, and I feel as though it's one of those things that just really, I love that about the Legend of Zelda series. As long as they don't make the dungeon feel too much like a trap or something dingy, like some kind of prison. But yeah, the aesthetic of dungeons, not so much my favorite thing, but the design of the dungeons, especially some of the puzzle room ones where, the configuration of the room keeps changing and revealing new paths. I really like that style that only the Legend of Zelda series has really done those big puzzle box rooms that well. Yeah,
well, last year I had a crack at sort of creating a procedurally generated dungeon tool, sort of creating Zelda-style dungeons. And I know you've done similar stuff in the past as well, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that's a worthwhile topic for a podcast at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Hob is a game where the entire world is one big puzzle dungeon. So I guess what I just previously said about the Legend of Zelda series being the only one that really does it properly is a lie, because Hob is fantastic at it. And that just dives all the way in, and I'd love to go into a breakdown on that because I loved that game.
Yeah, well, let's do it. book it in. I'll check my calendar.
All right, cool. So other interesting things on the Nintendo Direct, we have Mario Golf, and Tom, you're a bit of a golf fan.
I'm a sucker for golf games. Like, I think it's about, every 2 years I'll find a golf game that just sort of ends up taking a month of my life away. I think the last one I sort of really got into was Everybody's Golf on the PS4.
Okay.
I'm very excited for a Mario golf game to come out again.
Yes, I remember playing golf with your friends.
Yeah.
And that was quite good. We played quite a bit there, and it's very literally a mini golf game. First person, I recall.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Other than sort of the first game that comes to my mind, which was Golf Story, which I don't think I ever ended up actually playing. There's
Right.
golf games seem to be more about iteration than innovation, and from like the footage that I saw from Nintendo Direct, this seems to be a very straightforward golf game, which again, there's nothing wrong with innovating on the same basic structure over and over again, and that's clearly been polished over the 40 years or whatever it's been now that people have been making golf games. So it'd be interesting to see how much is different when the game comes out.
Oh yeah, I was really enthused by the running, the golf racing.
Oh yeah,
I've wanted
yeah.
to do that myself for some time, and that looks awesome. Just high-paced, low accuracy, get to the hole first, it's time to speedrun this shit. It's the absolute opposite of golf, which is what's got me so tantalized about it. It's that Mario Kart experience coming into golf.
Yeah, no, that looks like a really interesting new gameplay mode.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind golf, like particularly the mini golf variety, but even things like I played the Wii Golf and Wii Sports Resort Golf, and I thought they were quite good. Spent probably more time than I thought I would on them, and that's because the underlying game of golf is a fun one to kind of just chip at, I guess.
Yeah, I think if you're playing by yourself, it can be quite a lonely game to play, especially as a video game. But if you've got a bunch of people over and you just want to sort of chew the fat while sort of doing something almost in the background, then golf games are perfect for that.
Yeah. So really looking forward to that. But aside from those two, there were no real major franchises. Splatoon 3, but again, there's nothing surprising about it, and it's still a ways off. It feels weird, like Nintendo has so many big franchises that they've just nebulously thrown the title up and kind of walked away from. I understand that development's been pretty heavily impacted at the moment, or maybe this is the sign that it's been impacted. But it's still interesting to see them continue that pattern of, hey guys, here's the logo, see you in a year or two.
Yeah, I'd be very sort of interested to learn what development's like at Nintendo at the moment, because, clearly studios around the world are sort of going remote, either temporarily or fully. That looks like EA's almost gone the opposite direction, where, did you see they bought a shopping centre for their new development headquarters?
Right.
Yeah.
So
I don't think they're planning on supporting remote working anytime soon.
Oh, it's a lockdown. It's just, you're only allowed to stay in one place, and this is it.
Yeah, it's the Dawn of the Dead style of lockdown.
Complete with the mall. That's fantastic.
But yeah, I've got no idea what Nintendo studios are doing for their developers as they continue to work in these times. And
yeah, I mean, the only thing we really know about Nintendo development outside of the Iwata Asks series, which, of course they're not doing anymore, but is that nebulous and kind of haunting white building that apparently everything that's awesome gets done in. And if they're not in that white building, then what's happening?
Yeah. Where does the Nintendo come from? And it's coming from somewhere if that Nintendo Direct's anything to go by, but...
Yeah, and I mean, if you were to believe their press releases, especially not so much in the last 10 years, but the 10 years prior, that it's just the white building just has Shigeru Miyamoto's brain hooked up to it, and it's actually the autonomous thing, and it generates new games and about 100 staff members to make it convincing.
Yeah. Yeah, they sort of turn a tap and the brain juice comes out into a cup, and then they sort of need that into a game.
Yeah, it's a good system. It's just not, unfortunately, quite as viable during these times.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll get that Nintendo brain juice flowing again shortly.
Yeah. Oh, I'm playing Bowser's Fury at the moment, so I'll talk about that in a moment. But also, we had in the last fortnight, Google's closed all of its Stadia studios, which, I mean, I'm not that surprised, but it does feel early.
Yeah, like, it's kind of the Google way where they sort of, throw money at a lot of different ideas and they don't necessarily follow through on anything if it doesn't have traction immediately. And, like, it always sucks when, game studios close and, developers don't get to make games anymore. But yeah, again, I don't know who's surprised by this.
Yeah. I can actually say I was on the pre-alpha for Daydream while it was still about to be announced. And Google development programs are that bad that I never had to sign an NDA. And also that they gave me essentially, my development kit was, they sent me a Nexus 5 as the controller. So that was meant to be the Daydream controller. And they sent me a Google Cardboard and they put a Nexus 6S in the Google Cardboard, and they're like, this is kind of what it's going to be like, maybe. And we're like, this is while I'm working at Half Brick, so it's like they pretty much need to, really pull stuff together in order to get game developers on board. And they're showing up with, 2 cardboards and 2 Nexus phones worth about $500 all up, and They weren't paying anything for it, so that did not go as they hoped it would.
Yeah. Yeah, here's your pile of cardboard. Go get 'em, Tiger.
Yeah, they give you the same affordance as maybe a Woolworths shopping staff member.
Yeah.
Here's your cardboard, mate. Go do your things.
Yeah, I think it's the Silicon Valley, fail quickly mindset that leads to a lot of these sort of ideas, which, it's not necessarily the greatest strategy for, creative projects.
Yeah, it seems like it's just so incredibly ignorant of the process existing and the process that has existed for game development for so long. It just feels crude that they would, go in and not expect to spend like crazy to get some market dominance. Like, you take a look at how hard Microsoft had to work to get the Xbox to where it was, and they didn't make anything off the first generation, and they had to push like crazy, and they were fighting so hard for every region that they existed in. They had to buy so many existing companies and also buy so many opportunities, like famously Halo, which was bought from Bungie, and it's like, oh my god, there's the amount of stuff that Microsoft had to do in early 2000. Google rocks up in 2019 and they're just like, yeah, we're going to make, we're going to make 2 games and we're going to open 2 game studios. And then in 2021, they're like, well, that didn't work. And you're like, you haven't waited the right amount of time yet.
Yeah, it's, I wonder if sort of the doubt that I have in the back of my mind is if there's even room for like another platform in the gaming market. Like,
yeah,
you sort of got the 3-way triopoly of Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo, and then you've also got sort of PC gaming competing with that as well. And then, there's all the other markets like mobile markets and things. But yeah, I just wonder if there's any more room in people's gaming diet for another thing.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem to me like the amount of... Like, you take a look at the Nintendo Switch and how well that's doing. And if you were to build a new device with the minimum specs that you could get something off the factory floor with, it's not much greater than what a Nintendo Switch is anyway. So you can already, using the minimum affordances to you, create a gaming device with the cheapest manufacturing process. Like, the components that you need for the cheapest device, or to manufacture the cheapest device that's capable of displaying a video, they're already going to be the same sort of power as the Nintendo Switch anyway. So just manufacturing a new device today means it's going to be automatically game console powered. So you don't really need that power to be remote. And I understand that there's a vision for, amazing ray tracing graphics. But is that hardware so inexpensive that it can't be offset by a couple of game sales. Like, it seems to me like Microsoft and Sony have already kind of gone to where that demand is, and it's already kind of cheap enough.
Yeah, and it also kind of feels like these sort of leaps forward in graphics processors aren't the, marketable feature that they were, 10 years ago, where,
Yeah.
I don't think people are asking for bigger or prettier games. They're just asking for tighter and better designed games.
Yeah, and I mean, I happily played The Witcher 3 on the Switch, despite the fact that it's a clearly inferior looking version, because, it's good enough.
Yeah, I'm playing Divinity 2 on the Switch at the moment, and it's the same deal. Like, that's not why I'm playing that game, because of how pretty it is. Yeah.
And I mean, I know that that's not the case for everything, and there's definitely a great case for big, beautiful cinematic game. But I also don't really understand why that's a cloud gaming thing. I can understand the massively multiplayer thing, like making a game around a network service.
Yeah. Well, I guess the other thing about, graphically impressive games is, like, the technology isn't necessarily the, block in the pipeline anymore. It's the actual time of producing those assets. Like,
yeah, yes, indeed. Yeah, the art assets just like on the Uncharted games or the God of War games, it's just daunting. I can't possibly imagine how much harder, how much more you can do.
Yeah, you just can't put down 2 planes and call it a tree anymore.
Yeah, that's it. All right, well, hopefully it's not the absolute end for the Stadia studio, for the Stadia. I don't know whether I hope for that or not, but yeah, I'm sorry to see those studios close. It's never a good thing. But on the other side, a friend of mine, Dave from Leamington Games, has just gone into early access for his word puzzle game, Words Collide. That's quite interesting, and I recommend anyone on Google Play check out that in early access. It's a really innovative take on the word puzzle game genre. It's one of those things where he has kind of gone, what type of game would I never want to make, and why would I never want to make it? And he answered word puzzle games, and then he's kind of gone into that to address it, and we'll do a future podcast where we interview him to talk about developing a game on your own, getting it onto Google Play, talking to all of that, because he is a one-man machine that just he's relentless. He's great at it too.
Sounds like a great dude to talk to.
Yeah, he's definitely got his head screwed on straight, so that'll be good. And you had a little bit on Larian Studios. What's that about?
Yeah, well, it's just because it's in my neck of the woods. Larian Studios, which is the company that's worked on Divinity 2 and is currently working on Baldur's Gate 3, has opened up a studio in Guildford, which is currently looking for applicants to apply for that. So if anyone's listening to this, because they've found it through me and in a similar part of the UK, then maybe you should consider applying for a job at Larian Studios.
Yeah, cool. So what else is that? What else do those guys kind of do? You've got Divinity there, and have they been around for a while? What's the story? I don't really know them.
Well, basically they made their bread and butter doing those sorts of turn-based RPGs, which, they're sort of one of the biggest studios in the world that are still sort of innovating in that TTRPG space. And, as I've said on the podcast before, I'm a huge fan of those sorts of games, and, there's not that many people making them. So, if you're a RPG buff, then they're, sort of the top dogs in the industry, and I'm just glad that they're expanding.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, I guess we're on to what are we playing?
What are we playing in this segment of the show? What are we playing in this segment of the show?
Do we have a what are we playing sting?
Maybe I should be like, what's your flavor? Ooh, what's your flavor? Bad joke leads to lengthy production. That's how this works.
Yeah, it's our curse.
All right, cool. Well, recently I've been playing Bowser's Fury. Bowser's Fury is the second half tie-in game for Mario 3D World's Switch port. And Bowser's Fury is a really interesting... a lot of people have been calling it an experiment, but I kind of think of it as a half Mario game, or at least it's about half the size of like a Mario 64, from what I can tell so far. I haven't finished it yet, but I feel like I'm entering its halfway point.
Yeah, that's like a interesting point, because I haven't played Mario 3D World. I usually only play like the big Mario games, like your Odysseys and your Galaxies and those sorts of.
What? Oh my god! You need to play Mario 3D World. It is a big Mario game. It just has a bunch of casual sort of features in there. It's hard Mario masquerading as easy Mario.
But it's so soft and round.
Yeah, but it's also so speed runny and time trially, and the mechanics are awesome. And this version has updated physics, which, look, I really want to talk about both of these, so I reckon all we tend to do in this podcast is just book future episodes of this podcast.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
But I think in my next diagnosis, it's definitely going to be that I'm sorry, a short hike. I will get back to you. But yeah, it's just immediately taken my time, and also there's just so many little tweaks, and because this has been ported by one of the main Nintendo studios again, and in their typical fashion, they tend to kind of make a few tweaks on their way through. And one of them has been that they've sped the running up, and they've added a couple of Odyssey's little tricks. But I mean, I used to do a lot of the time trialing in 3D World back in the day, and I really enjoyed it as a hard and fast Mario game. I think it is every bit as good as the Galaxy games, and it probably better. It's probably my favorite Mario game because it's as good on the single player basis, and then the multiplayer stuff is just tissimo. I don't know, Italian word for good.
Bueno?
Bueno.
Yeah.
Muchas gracias.
Oh, okay. No, you've sold me. Yeah, because I love Mario games. I love platforming games in general. But yeah, like when sort of those, like Mario Odyssey, for example, came out, I ended up losing 3 months not playing anything else because I had to finish every single little thing in that game. So if there's a game like that where there's less to string me along with, I think I'll have a much healthier relationship with it.
Yeah. The first time I played Super Mario 3D World, I played it with a mate simultaneously as playing it with my wife. So I was actually playing 2 co-op profiles, and I also played a single player profile. So I ended up beating the game 3 times within like the first month. I've never done that with any other game.
Huh. Okay, no, that sounds like exactly the sort of length of time I want a game to go for.
But yeah, the co-op is transformative, but at the same time, like the time trialing is awesome. And I haven't played enough of the port to see whether or not the time trialing is back in the same fashion, because it kind of played in a little bit with the Miiverse stuff, but the Miiverse was obviously disconnected after the Wii U's kind of reign at the top, or at the bottom as it would be. But I mean, at the top of their slate was shifted. Yeah. But back to Bowser's Fury. Like, it's really interesting. I'm not sure how much you've seen of it, Tom.
I've seen the trailer, and I've hovered over the purchase button on it in the Nintendo Store a couple of times.
Okay, so it is essentially a new... You can think of it as a new, much bigger kingdom for Mario Odyssey that's in 3D World style, in that, you know, certain parts unlock as you go along, and there's no real breaks, and the cat shines are kind of like your moons, and there's quite a few of them. But then there's the mecha boss fight mechanic, which it acts as your world expansion thing. So every time you defeat Bowser, the world expands a little bit further, and you have some new playgrounds to play in. It's really cool and really different, but kind of familiar at the same time. Everything's a cat, which is absolutely phenomenal. Yeah, I like that aspect of it.
Lovely. Yeah, no, more cats the better.
Yeah. So in summary, Bowser's Fury, everything's a cat. Get it?
Yeah. My favorite part of the trailer was Bowser's awesome theme song.
Huh. I don't recall that from the trailer.
Some sweet heavy metal licks.
Oh, yeah. That definitely happened. Yeah.
Heavy metal and cats. That's a Danzig approved game.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel as though that's something that just... It may as well have just said heavy metal.
Yeah.
So the other thing I've been playing with is, again, we're doing dev tools in this section. We might be calling it What Are We Doing Soon or something. I don't know. But this is on the making side of things. I've been fiddling around with Godot. I'm probably into maybe I've spent like 60 hours all up I mean, compared to my decade or so of Unity development, it's nothing, but it's very promising. And I've been doing the CSG, or the procedural geometry stuff, and trying to figure out whether or not that's going to be my next level or world building tool.
Yeah, no, I've done quite a bit of Godot stuff. I'm pretty sure the little prototype that I did in Godot is what got me my current job.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of that, especially for 2D development stuff. Like I always kind of felt in Unity I was kind of fighting against the engine a little bit anytime I wanted to do anything in 2D.
Yeah, unless it's not pixely 2D. Like if you're doing like a Rayman type thing, then it's fine. But
yeah.
But
anytime you want to like work in pixels, then it's sort of Godot's much better for that. And when I was working on it, it was sort of like right on the precipice when they hadn't quite introduced support for C# yet, but it was like in beta, and then I think by the time I sort of got bored of that project and moved on to the next thing, it was actually part of the official release.
Yeah, it's one of the flavors of the release. I actually haven't been using that. Even though C# is what I use day in, day out, it's probably one of my most proficient languages. The creator of Godot is like utterly convinced that GDScript is perfect for it, and he makes some really good points. And I'm kind of happy to follow him along that. And I've done some considerable stuff with GDScript, and I'm on board.
Yeah, like what do you think is the closest analog language to a GDScript?
It's like Python in that everything is kind of, a dynamic class. There's type hinting on it, which is pretty decent actually. Its type inference engine is okay, and it won't let you disobey types that you've kind of declared. So it's soft typing or inferred typing, and that's not bad. As a language, it's just all right, but as an integrated language, it's very good. Like being able to traverse the scene with auto-completion for what's in the scene tree is amazing.
Yeah, so you're using the inbuilt text editor for Godot, or are you using an external editor? Right.
I'm using the inbuilt one. Look, it's pretty okay. It's got just enough features. It does feel a little bit like a toy compared to my regular IDEs. Like I use Rider for C# and VS Code, sometimes for C# and sometimes for TypeScript, JavaScript, that sort of thing. So I'm mostly in the JetBrains or Visual Studio family for my stuff, and it definitely feels lacking compared to those. But it's perfectly fine for declaring, a component script or a node script. It does a lot of the lifting for you. It's more convenient in other areas, which I've found to be a boost in productivity. That, and it's lighter. Like the C# thing is cool, but it's also an extra add-on with extra bindings. It's an extra runtime. It's, it can be more performant, but because it's less married to the purpose of the engine, it'll always just kind of feel a little bit like it's an extra to me.
Yeah. And what about the CSG stuff that you're doing? How have you gone with that?
So there's a lot of inbuilt path CSG stuff. Like you can draw a path and extrude from it. You can use subtractive geometry stuff in order to build rooms out and that sort of thing. So I'm mostly just playing around with that. But I'm also writing a tool that kind of actually inspired by Mario 3D World's aesthetic, where it kind of allows you to topographically design a level, and then you can kind of place your different block shapes in different areas, and it'll do all the lovely beveling of edges and map the materials and all of that sort of stuff in real time. A collaborator and a friend of mine from Halfbrick was doing something like that in Unity, and it was really cool. And I just kind of wanted to see whether or not I could do something like that in Godot.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind that guy is an engine developer and probably one of the best coders that I've ever worked with, and I am like a long way behind him, so I'm just playing catch up at this stage, but using new tools to do it.
Yeah, there's always a bigger programmer.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and the last thing I'm doing, or what I'm playing, is I'm playing the Australian Business Registry. That's right, I'm getting my ABN and GST so I can get my game on the App Store. And it's a really boring part of game development that nobody ever mentioned. That's right, I couldn't flip the switch until I got an ABN and registered for GST.
Really?
So if you're out there,
That's why I got into games.
what,
To
not-
sign up for, an ABN and go through tax forms.
If only, look, I want to be a business, but if only I could wait a couple of years before having my first product.
Yeah, no, I'm just sad you have to actually make something.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, so if you're out there and you're getting close to it, just remember to do that if you want to put any monetization in your game. And that made everything about the monetization decision just feel that much worse.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, you grub, go sign some grub forms, you grub, if you want to be such a grub for putting grubby money in your goddamn grubby game. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't mean it.
Do you think your time's worth something?
This is App Store, mate. Free to play, free to develop. Yeah, so that's... look, I'm through that process, but it has kind of knocked the wind out of the marketing strategy that I was doing. So I'm going to take a couple of weeks, because this is totally a free time endeavor, just to, take a deep breath, and get ready for the launching again, I guess.
Yeah, no, if you're not starving, then, you should take your time and make sure you do these things right.
Yeah, and it's all an experiment in kind of like this whole game was a 3-month project, kind of designed to just be like exactly that, a trial of doing mobile games on my own. It was kind of a thing I'd wanted to do when I left Halfbrick, was do that, and I just went straight into the web industry and didn't really get my go at it. So I've been spending some free time kind of working at that, and I just kind of want to size it up before I do anything significant, I guess. I mean, this is not insignificant, it's just not like a grand idea. Maybe that's why it's working.
Yeah. No, that's, I'm very interested to follow this process along. And, yeah, because I'm on a visa over here at the moment. I can't actually monetize any of my side projects, so I'm also slightly jealous of you.
Yeah. Especially if your goal was just to get an ABN and register for GST.
Yeah. I should have thought about that before migrating.
Yeah, and Dave, who, as I mentioned earlier, is doing a release or a early access release on Google Play Games at the moment, has been incredibly helpful in that process, having walked through it. And yeah, he's just able to kind of, give me a nudge in the right direction there when I need to know what the next step is, and that's been invaluable.
Yeah, you should never underestimate the power of, involving yourself in the gaming community.
Yeah, absolutely. So what have you been playing, Tom?
Well, I just haven't been able to stop playing Hades. It's so good. We've actually started doing this thing at my day job where we've started like a book club, but for games. And the first game that we're doing is Hades. So just when I thought I could stop playing it, because we did our podcast episode on it, I had to keep playing it so I can talk about it at work. But it does mean I can take all the ideas that we discussed in that and pass them off as spontaneous original thoughts when we do the game club meeting.
I've got a brilliant idea. What you should do is just get your dialogue from that, wear a mask, and then just play your dialogue every now and then, and just have a play pause button in your pocket, like a Bluetooth clicker, and then you can just go to sleep, Homer Simpson style. Well, you need those glasses as well.
Yeah, with the open eyeballs painted on the outside.
Yeah, and they'll be like, oh, that's really insightful, Tom.
Yeah.
Also, can we hear a soft voice in the background of your audio? I mean, not audio. They wouldn't call it audio if you were speaking.
That's just what British people call speaking.
It's the Queen's English.
We'll call you on the telly for an audio.
Yeah, you're glad to see your English accent hasn't gotten any better.
Yeah. But other than Hades, the other thing I've been working my way through after years of just trying to find the time for it is the Steve Jackson Sorcery games on iOS, which were
Right.
developed by Inkle Studios. How much do you know about either Steve Jackson Sorcery or Inkle Studios.
Look, I don't know anything about Inkle, but I've heard of Sorcery. Was it on PC ages ago, and then now it's an iPhone game?
I don't know if there was ever a PC adaptation, but the absolute earliest version of it was a bunch of choose your own adventure books in the 70s or 80s. Yeah.
That's what it is. Yeah, okay. So I knew it was a much older game, but yeah, I don't know anything really about it then, obviously.
Yeah, basically the narrative or choose your own adventure games that have been adapted for mobile, but they've done some very interesting things with them. They're not, sort of straight ports of the book. And so the reason I've started playing them is because I'm working on a sort of narrative-heavy RPG in my spare time, and I've been watching GDC talks with the developers of the Sorcery games. And it's there's 4 Sorcery games on the store, and each one has sort of iterated on the ideas of the previous one. So Sorcery 1 is probably the closest to the original books, where it's basically a branching narrative. Whereas as the games progress, they sort of start toying with the ideas of, open world, being able to revisit locations and, change decisions and, things that you can't do in a choose your own adventure book. But sort of one of the really interesting things that I learnt from the GDC talks that I've lifted wholesale for my game is sort of how they keep track of state in the narrative branches that they go down.
Okay.
So traditionally what happens with, branching dialogue and sort of keeping track of a quest is each time there's an event in a quest, you keep track of a condition. So, say there's a quest where, there's a werewolf in a forest and it's terrorizing villagers and, there's someone living in a hut and you speak to them. That might be the first time that you hear about the werewolf in the forest. So you'd set a flag saying, spoken to villager about werewolf. And so then if you come back to them, the story tree acknowledges that and gives you the branching options of, what dialogue options you can have to chat to them. But, there might have been the chance that you ran into the wolf before you spoke to that villager, so it doesn't make sense for them to say, there's a wolf out in the woods, because you already know about it. So
is that just on the iPhone games, or is that something in the older split narrative novels?
I think it's a technique that's fairly common to lots of branching narrative games. So, if you go back to your old sort of Infinity Engine TTRPGs, I think they do a similar thing. Whereas I think they do it in a much cleverer way, where rather than keeping track of, all these different conditions of either seen wolf, spoken to villager, run away from wolf, basically it treats all these sort of quest paths as, a length of conditions, and then it just sort of takes the latest one that you've completed and it assumes that all the conditions before that point in whichever narrative story or whichever narrative branch you're going down are true.
Right. That feels like, forgive me if I'm not getting it, but that does feel a little bit like, how the unlocks in older adventure games worked, where they just check, okay, you've got this item, so you must have had to have already spoken to this person and gone through this dungeon and been to this part of the world and got this item and all that other stuff.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. But that's something that I've just stolen wholesale for the project that I'm working on, and
cool.
It's one of those things. If I hadn't sat down and watched that GDC talk about it, I would have probably kept doing this much worse way of doing it.
Okay. Yeah, it's really interesting watching, especially with like some of those older Legend of Zelda games when they're being speedrun and seeing how those flags end up getting hacked in. I've seen, obviously there's the arbitrary code execution stuff that they've been doing in Ocarina of Time, which is batshit insane.
Yeah.
But there's also that whole... you'll have to go to this island because it'll set some invisible flag that they somehow know about from, having played every route or run a task through it or inspect the memory in an emulator. And it's just like, oh man, it's exhausting, but it's kind of cool.
Yeah, and, if you want to learn about development, then watching speedruns is actually a really great way to do it, because that helps you see where the seams in a game are.
Yeah, yeah. Except don't make your things one frame window wide, because speedrunners will say every trick is a frame perfect trick, and it'll be like a 5 frame window or something. It'll be like a tenth of a second or something like that.
Yeah. But yeah, that sort of like goes back to, I think, what's quickly becoming one of the themes of this channel is that stealing design is good, and a good way to steal clever design is to watch GDC videos or speedruns, because you learn a lot about making games that you wouldn't just by, making games.
Yeah. And it can be really interesting to see from a mechanical perspective as well. Like, they might find something that they can accidentally do that doesn't really feature in a game, and then if you figure out a way to sort of, create something like that and casualify it and kind of spin it in different directions, then you kind of have a new mechanic. Like, one of the ones that was really interesting in the Wind Waker HD thing is they've got a hook slide thing that they do, and it's kind of like a flat ground grappling thing it looks kind of fun. I'd like to do a prototype where you've got a grappling hook, but you can't grapple up, you can only grapple across.
Yeah, that'd be cool. So yeah, that's what I've been playing recently. The other thing which I've been technically playing with is there's a studio called Cinti Studios, which is based out in New Zealand, which produce asset packs. And if you spend any amount of time in the sort of depths of any digital store, you'll start to recognize the art style. I've seen more than a couple of games on the Nintendo store using their art, and it's the same for a lot of, unfortunately, asset flip type games on the Steam store. But I've been using their asset packs for sort of placeholder art for the project that I'm working on, because I'm very bad at art. And they produce very good art that's very easy to sort of block out my game with. But they've recently released a new pack called the Dungeon Realms pack, which I picked up last week, which I have already started putting in as placeholder art in my game, and I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah, this looks really nice. It kind of reminds me of For the King.
Yeah, it's that low poly art style, which for asset pack is very good, because it lets you, drop it into mobile games, but it's also sort of stylized enough that you can use it as placeholder art for, bigger games, whether it's console or I'm not even sure what platform I'm releasing my game on yet, if it ever gets released. But it's as a developer that can't sort of produce their own art, it's always very exciting to get a box of toys like an asset pack like this and start dropping them into the world that you've been building and turning the placeholder cylinders and cubes that you've been using for buildings and people into things with arms and legs.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing all of my own modeling, and it's time consuming and doesn't turn out anywhere near as nice as some of this stuff. So, I mean, this has definitely given me food for thought. If I wasn't such a masochist, I'd probably definitely give this a go.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'd ever release a game with this art in it, just because, like I said, if you go to any of these storefronts, you start seeing these assets showing up in so many games that it's...
Yeah, is that an argument against it, though, or do you think it won't let you stand out? Is that kind of your perspective there, or...?
Yeah, it won't let you stand out, and, I think there's just been so many, games made in bad faith, those sort of asset flip games, that I think there's probably a stigma attached to it, which, again, that's not Cinti Studios' fault. They produce high-quality assets at a, reasonable price.
Are they paying you?
I just want more assets.
The deal is they give you assets at the price of those assets.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But because they're so accessible to anyone, and they don't have to license them, they just end up in so many games, and so many of those games are bad. I think there's probably a stigma attached to it. But it might also be, if you're a developer that is sort of keeping track of these storefronts and also know where these assets came from, it might be different to your average punter just looking through a store trying to find something to play.
Yeah, that would I mean, it's super useful to get over that first hurdle too. Like I spent so much time early on in a project trying to figure out what my main world construction tools are going to be, and like, honestly, that does kill a large number of projects in their kind of, you get one zone prototyped and then you go and open up the new scene to start your next zone and you're just like, I'm exhausted, I'm out.
Yeah, totally. And again, it's also depends like why you're developing a game. Like, I'm not even sure if I'll ever release this game, or if I release it, if I'll charge money for it. But I just enjoy making games, and this adds production qualities to my little hobby project that it wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely justified. I think it's probably, even shipping with it's justified. If you've got your original idea going still, then that's fine. And also, this looks like great stuff to maybe build some worlds with, even if you've got your own unique characters or something like that.
Oh yeah, no, like, because with this project, I'm sort of creating this video game and also creating like a tabletop RPG adventure based on it at the same time. So I've been taking, screenshots from the game and dropping them into my tabletop version of it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, because making a game on your own's not enough, is it? You gotta do more.
Yeah, no, I need to make 2 games at the same time in 2 different mediums. I think I've got a brain sickness.
I'm like that too, honestly. I'm like, man, if only I could turn making this game into like a YouTube series. Which, I mean, watch this space. I might end up doing that. I've definitely done a few mock-ups. Yeah, if the editing wasn't so goddamn time-consuming, because you have to stop making the game to edit. Yeah, and that's time-consuming, and I'd much rather just be making games.
Yeah. Well, speaking of making games, and also taking on more work than you need to do, let's talk about the game design brief that I gave you in the last episode.
Certainly.
I like game design. I open up my mind and game design. I get quite demanding without understanding. I like game design. I open up my mind and game design.
Alright, so last time I gave you a brief to make a game, and the brief was, it needs to be about Greek mythology, it needs to be about court intrigue, and it has to have a random mechanic that isn't determined by dice.
Okay, so the first question that popped up in my head was, what exactly is court intrigue in this regard? Because, I kind of had pictured it as courtroom intrigue, and I think I might have actually slipped up and said courtroom intrigue in the last podcast. But it can also be intrigue within like a kingdom court. Is that right? Or
yeah, that's what I was going with, because we were talking about Hades in the last episode, and there's a bit of that in its narrative.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, that's probably the kind of the weakest element that I've carried across. I've definitely gone all in on the Greek mythology, and I made sure that there were no random mechanics, so I really doubled down on that one. But may I present some of my thinking here? The game is going to be called the Athenian Philosophical Olympic Pentathlon. Yes. So, all right. So some of the ideas that I had was, we've got Greek. So I was like, you could be something where you become a new Greek god. Like obviously that was playing on both of our minds because of the Hades stuff and the Phoenix Immortal Rising. This was all pretty close to the top of the dome. And then I was like, that could be fun to have like the Olympics in there. And then I was like, all right, we can do like a philosophy Olympics because it's audible only. So, you've got to kind of describe how good you are at Olympic events rather than do the Olympic events. I thought for court intrigue, I could involve some Athenian democratic debate. That's kind of your court intrigue thing there, I guess.
Yeah, no, that totally works for it.
And philosophical debate. I figure the Greeks are definitely, they're debaters, that's for damn sure. And philosophy is all through this. And then getting to the non-random decision making. Now, this was a lot of fun And I was actually surprised with, like I mentioned in the last podcast, the first idea that came off the top of my head was having decisions based on clock quadrants. And I went quite a way in thinking about ideas there. I ended up using less of it than I thought, but there was at one stage a version of this game where essentially you'd keep debating until it was in the correct quadrant of the clock, and then you'd basically try to win by debating for long enough. And there'd be, a judge that would disqualify you if you started waffling or drifting too much.
I think that's what a filibuster is, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I was worried about, I was worried that a clock doesn't have, like, the seconds are too short for that and hours are too long.
Yeah. Oh, hour would be hardcore.
That's filibuster territory there. So I did end up doing some hemisphere and quadrant-based outcomes, but nowhere near as much as I thought. The other one is timed rounds, which also, again, going off the clock thing. So that's, the longer debater or the winner is the one speaking at the end of the round. I kind of like those ones where you've got to try to draw it out and pass it around at the same time. There's a Mario Party game that's pretty much in half of the Mario Kart parties where you got to pass the bomb and it'll get closer and closer to exploding, but you don't want to be the one that it explodes on. That's great fun. Strongest debate and democratically voted decisions. So this is, once again for the title, the Athenian Philosophical Olympic Pentathlon. That's right, it's like the Olympics, but it's verbal and philosophical, and there's 5 events. May the best debater win. So let's start with the rules. There are 2 umpires, who hereafter will be referred to as magistrates. The umpires are 2 Athenian magistrates named Archimedale and Aristotom. Some rounds are decided by the first to act, others when the first unanimous decision is made. There's a clock, which hereafter will be referred to as the sundial. It's a wall clock, but we call it a sundial. It's used for timing the events of the game. There are persistent bonuses in every one of the 5 events. Either magistrate can award a bonus point after any attempt for a particularly Greek answer, and a point can be subtracted for anyone who calls the clock anything but a sundial. And anything marked with reveal... Oh, I won't say that. That's a secret. Yeah. All right, so before I get into the sports, Tom... What are your thoughts?
I'm a big fan of the naming conventions. This Aristotom magistrate sounds like a very handsome dude.
I mean, yeah, but not as handsome as that Archimedale one. He sounds pretty good.
Yeah, like I'm struggling to think of any games that have sort of built around a structure like this, which is like really interesting and novel, sort of having different defined events. The only one I can really think of is, I don't know if you watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Oh, yeah, I think I can see where this is going.
Yeah, and they invent a game called Charlie McDennis, which,
yeah.
Which I think also has a bunch of rules about, being penalised if you call something by the wrong name.
Yeah. I think, I've forgotten the name of the... I was lightly inspired by... there's a game... I'm really cooking it. I can't remember the name of it. There's a game that a couple of the guys at Halfbrick used to play at lunchtime where one of the sports is javelin. It's like it's a series of party games, essentially, all sport themed. Yeah, this game design is pretty much straight from Mario Party, though, but not your grandfather's Mario Party.
No, your great-great-great-great-great-grandfather's Mario Party.
Yeah, possibly. There's a lot of greats in there, and that's why this will be great. So let's get into the sports. So, sport number 1, the philosophical javelin. So players can get ahead by describing their javelin throw, and the best throw wins. So get descriptive. The score is the number of 10-second blocks you take to describe it using metaphors and ancient storytelling. You can diminish the previous throw's scores by putting them down in order to get further ahead. And either umpire can end the throw for waffling, extraneous hyperbole, or bad sportsmanship. Everyone gets 2 throws each, and the points are added to the pentathlon total. So that's the first sport. In the second sport, we have single combat. So this one's in 1-minute rounds, and players have to be the strongest warrior in a game of one-upsmanship. The players have got to describe who would beat the previous player, how they would beat the previous player in a round of single combat. If their argument is compelling, they win and a point is awarded to them. If they take too long, which is decided by one of the magistrates, or they don't have a convincing victory, they lose and an additional point is awarded to the previous player. The rounds last a minute on the clock, and at the end of the timer, the last player can finish their argument, and the winner of that argument is then awarded 3 points. So there's 2 rounds each for that one too. And then sport number 3, we have the, it's getting pretty rules heavy. My eyes are glossing over like I'm about to play a tabletop RPG.
Yeah.
All right, so for sport number 3, I had the philosophical discus. Now, this might seem a little bit like philosophical javelin, but I promise you it's completely different. This time it's a disc. So the players can get ahead by describing their discus throw, and the best throws wins. It's a completely novel idea, nothing like the previous one. The score is the number of seconds they take to describe it using metaphors and ancient storytelling. Not again, this is totally unique. They can diminish the previous throw's scores by, describing that theirs is better, putting down the previous throw, describing theirs being thrown past in order to get further ahead, and either umpire can end the throw for waffling, extraneous, hyperbole, or bad sportsmanship. Everyone gets 2 throws each.
Okay, you know what this is starting to remind me of?
What?
There is a tabletop RPG called The Adventures of Baron Munchausen,
Right.
which is basically a game of competitively telling tall tales and trying to one-up each other with your elaborate stories.
Yeah.
But what it doesn't have that this one does is umpires, which I think is a really neat balance to that. And being I think from what I remember from Baron Munchausen, it's people just trying to agree amongst themselves who had the best story, but this has an authority that tells you who absolutely does have the best story.
I wanted to keep us in as DMs because I feel like we've got to design it for podcast play as well. So that's why these are all pretty much just Jackbox games, but with a Greek Olympic feel or something.
Yeah, and talking.
Yeah, heaps of talking. Speaking of which, sport number 4 is debate for ascension. So this one's got 2-minute rounds, and the players have to become the strongest god in a game of one-upsmanship. It's a little bit like the single combat one. The players have got to take turns describing how they would beat the previous god in a battle with their godly trait or power. So I don't know if you've ever played that strongest superhero power win game, Tom?
No, how does that one work?
It's like a game you play with kids, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna be made of metal. Or I'm gonna have magnesis, and I'll be able to like throw you around.
All right, yeah.
I'll be able to like set you on fire because everyone knows that magnets grab fire, and you got to do that sort of thing.
I'll tell you my favorite superhero power is it's a character in Doom Patrol who has all the powers that you haven't thought of yet. So every time someone thinks of a power, they lose a power. But that's always been my favorite thing in a comic book.
I really like that. Yeah. Well, this was kind of inspired a bit by the. I was recently going through the audiobook of Sandman, and there's a game that he plays in hell with a demon, and essentially, as like they describe how they defeat each other, and that gives them the victory.
Yeah, I think I remember that from the comic books.
Yeah, and it's just, I thought that would make an excellent game. Like, if you strapped a couple of rules onto it, and then see how it goes. In this case, the same umpires that were in all the previous ones. And so this one, you only get about a minute on the clock, and at the end of the timer, the players can finish their argument, and then the winner of that last argument is awarded 3 points again. Again, if you take too long to describe your power, if it's a repeat, if it's not convincing that it would win, either magistrate can decide that you lose. But if you make it through, you win. And there'll be 2 rounds of that. as well.
Okay, what about the fifth sport?
Well, the last sport is the philosophical chariot race, and I've saved the main event for last because this one is, like, it's involved. I've essentially come up with a 3-round thing, which is nearly another bunch of games on top of it. But I feel as though the chariot race really does need to be the piece de resistance, even though it was probably more popularized in Rome than Greece. We're playing loose with this stuff. There were chariots in Rome, but Greece.
Olden times.
Yeah, it's anything before us.
Yeah, ye olde Greece.
So in the first round, the players are given 2 minutes to write down a combination of horse, cart, and strategy that will win them the race. So kind of like in Quiplash or in a Jackbox game, Quiplash, you've got to kind of write this one down without kind of talking. So at the end of the 2 minutes, everyone reads their combination aloud, and then the winner decided by Archimedes is awarded 5 points, and the runner-up is awarded 3 points by Aristotle. And then, there might be bonus points in there. We'll just have to play it and see. I might be reading an instruction to say not to say something out loud, but that's fine.
No one will remember.
Yeah, well, I mean, do we reveal on the rules podcast?
That's a good question. I think we should.
Yeah, okay.
One, because I think, anyone that plays this game will probably have forgotten that by the time we actually get around to playing with them, and B, the first time you play this game, you'll have this revealed to you anyway.
Yeah. Okay, cool. It's not like it's a massive thing, but there'll be a bonus 2 points awarded for the most descriptive, and that's decided by both magistrates. And the reason why that will be revealed afterwards is because it's going to be a bit of a balance striker. In fact, you know what? We could probably make it worth 4 points just to really tip the scales.
Yeah, like it's always so hard to do this sort of fine-tuning stuff for a game that you've never played on paper before. Or played for real before, rather.
Yeah. But I feel like the 4 points is going to be... you know what? I'm putting it back to 2. Let's just say the design challenge is over by the start of this episode, and I'm not allowed to edit it again.
Yep, play it where it lays.
Actually, yeah. I mean, we could do that. Or we could just run through and tweak some stuff. Well, we might run through and tweak some stuff. That could be fun.
Yeah, patch it.
Yeah, get patch notes going before the first play. Everyone knows you don't need to play test to improve. Yeah, don't disregard that, please. All right, in the second round, there's another 2 minutes, and everyone gets a second shot. At the end of the 2 minutes, they're read aloud again, but this time Aristotle awards 5 and Archimedes awards 3. So it's a reverse magistrate kind of situation. And this time, a bonus 2 points are awarded for the least descriptive or most succinct, as decided by both magistrates. Each. There we go. We'll make it 2 points each. Everyone gets 2 points each. Decided. So there's up to 4 points awarded by magistrates.
Yeah, that works.
And then bonus round, both magistrates award a further 2 points each to the chariot they believe would actually win a horse race. From both rounds. So that's all of the events in the philosophical Olympic pentathlon, all 5 events. And after that, we'll have a medal ceremony, and we'll give a bonus 3 points in Mario Party style. I guess I'm really showing that Mario Party was here, which is in the skeleton by having the bullshit ceremony after the actual game, just so that, there's, I guess, just a little bit of disruption or whatever. I don't know. I never liked this part of Mario Party, so I have no idea why I'm propagating it, which means that I may be on the Mario Party team.
Well, you have removed the roll to move, so you've taken out my biggest problem with Mario Party anyway.
Yeah, fair enough. So the first award is the Leonidas or Spartan Award, which is given to the player with the most warlike approach to the game. We then have the second award, which is the Socrates Award, or the most Socratic Award, which is the player with the wisest approach. We then have the Euclid Award, which is the player with the most calculated approach. And then the points are tallied, and the victor becomes the Athenian Philosophical Olympic Pentathlon Champion. Yeah. and the crowd goes wild. So, I think this is going to be fun. It's definitely quite Jackboxy, quite Mario Party. It's definitely designed for, the players are going to be the form of the entertainment here for sure.
Yeah, no, this, like, what I really like about this is sort of like a one-shot format is it's clearly got, like, a ramp-up in, spectacle. And, it's sort of like, because when you run a one-shot of an adventure for a night, you can never sort of be guaranteed that, it's sort of got a cohesive beginning, middle, and end, and you sort of finish at a point where, you can draw a line under it and everyone goes home happy that they've, sat through an adventure, whereas, like, that's built into the format of this, which is very neat.
Yeah, cheers. My trick was definitely to repeat 2 games twice. And then once I'd done that, I made the second one more significant than the first, and then found the most significant game, made it stand alone and raised the stakes and made it a little bit more nuanced. So, hopefully that's a crescendo. This is very, very Far Cry style game design. It's the same thing twice, and then there's a third thing that makes it feel a little bit different.
Yeah, and I like how it's sort of taken a lot of inspiration from video games, because, well, video games tend to take a lot of inspiration from tabletop games that doesn't necessarily come back the other way quite as often.
Yeah, we're going to get a bit of that, I guess, just because my tabletop experience is relatively fleeting and my video game experience is much more comprehensive, so I guess you write what you know, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's how new ideas get percolated, right?
Yeah, definitely. Take something from one place, throw it into another, and adapt and adapt and adapt.
Yeah, so I guess we just need to work out how to play this on the podcast now.
Yeah, I feel like it's probably like a 3 or 4 contestant kind of thing. You wouldn't want to jam in too many more people. Logistically, that might be tough, but I reckon we might be able to get a couple of mates each in for this.
Yeah, well, who's going to be Archimedale and Aristotom?
That'll be us. Yeah.
But which one's which?
I'm not sure. We'll have to figure it out on the day. Maybe by a roll of clock.
Yep. Yeah, we'll use the hour hand. Do it properly.
I love that you will have a full hour to decide when to stop your debate argument. You imagine, like, deciding on the 59-minute mark?
Yep.
Just utterly disgusting. We'll definitely get some people and we'll give this a play. But I guess the next thing for us, that concludes the design portion of the podcast, but it's time for me to set you with a design challenge.
Oh no, this is payback for the last one.
Design challenge.
It's a design challenge.
Lowest prices are just the beginning.
Alright, Dale, what do you have for me?
Alright, so I feel like you should design a narrative role-playing game.
Oh, I like those.
Based on Tommy Wiseau's The Room.
Oh no!
Don't pretend like you weren't given it last week. I'm ruining the podcast magic.
I did not design that, I did not. Oh, hi, Dale.
Yeah, I can't wait to read what I have already read. I'm ruining the podcast magic again.
Yep.
But yeah, tune in next week for Tom's design on Tommy Wiseau's The Room, narrative role-playing game. And I did give him this prompt a week ago, and he's turned it in. It's quite good. I'm looking forward to discussing it further and seeing what comes up there.
Excellent.
Yeah. So what do you reckon on the Greek court intrigue? Did you have any twists that you were going to do back on that?
Sort of one of the things I was thinking about was maybe if you had a way to interrupt people as they were delivering their tall tales, sort of to give people that went earlier in the round a chance to sort of like claw things back. So I guess anyone that goes after the first person sort of knows how long they need to make it to,
Yes.
spin the tale for further. So if there was like a mechanic to sort of counterbalance that. That could be an interesting addition.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I've gone for 2 throws each, but I'm not utterly convinced that that's... Like, most of them are 2 rounds each, but I'm not completely convinced that it doesn't... Like, you know, obviously the first player only gets a chance to one-up once.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it was Roman, I would have probably put in the, like, just stabbing as as the way to interrupt the other player.
Yeah. Or, if it wasn't for this damn audio format and also the fact that we're half the planet away from each other, maybe if you had to, like, draw bricks from a Jenga tower as you were delivering it, so you have to try and stop before you knock the tower over, but you also want to, like, make it as unstable as possible for whatever comes next.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Oh,
I'm
I
lifting
like
that straight from another RPG called Dread, but I always got a chuckle out of the Jenga tower as a mechanic for introducing tension to a game.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
I don't know, what else is there? So, like, obviously shouting insults and distractions will get incredibly busy with 6 people on a cast.
Yeah.
Maybe it's only the previous player. What's something Greek? Like a reaction that somebody would have that's kind of Greek.
Drinking wine. They're big into wine.
But how would you drink wine as a retort? That's a feature. You have to get drunk enough to... no. Is there... Yeah, I don't really know enough about ancient Greece.
Everything I've learnt is from Hades and the 2004 movie with Bradley Pitt, Troy.
What? Why would anybody learn anything from that film?
Because it's so long. You pick up something from it.
It's long enough that you have to, like, start doing other things with your life during it, including education. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. You could have like a Zeus lightning thing. Like, you could essentially, you know, maybe the previous player can just yell crack, and that equals a lightning strike.
Yeah. Or release the Kraken.
I'm not sure. Maybe you can... All right. How about whoever the previous player is can have Zorba Dance loaded up on their mobile phone, and they're allowed to use that, playing that out loud near the other player as a distraction in any way that... Oh, no, that needs same space as well, doesn't it? Yeah, all right.
Yeah. Plus, you know, I love that song, so I don't know how that'd be a distraction.
He's playing the best game of his goddamn life.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Maybe that's something we can have a think on.
Yeah. We'll see. I think this might be the next podcast, or maybe your design is the next podcast. I'm not sure. I guess we'll do the housekeeping after the podcast. I guess speaking of which, this is probably the logical closing point of the podcast.
Yep, when we start discussing what we might do on the next podcast.
Which, as I mentioned during the podcast, is pretty much all we do on the podcast. But I'm looking forward to it. So until next time, I've been Dale.
I've been Tom.
Say your catchphrase.
It's a game.
It's game. Bye-bye.